Welcome back to another exciting episode of Rough Sketch, the Final Draft. I am your host, Coach Adam, and we are continuing into season 4 with amazing guests and into these journeys of diving into what is the purpose of identity, diving into the understanding of what it is to discover yourself and to peel back those layers of self and to really find who we truly are. That's what this season is all about. And I am bringing on incredible guests, and we are visited by an amazing guest this week, being able to dive into these topics even more. So I'm going to allow my amazing guest to introduce herself for us today. Here we go.
Thanks, Adam. I'm Kirsten Hotelling-Zona. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me. I am a way shower. I'm a life coach. I'm a teacher. I'm an author. I was a professor for about 25 years of poetry and poetics, and I retired. I left academia a year ago to pursue all those other things full time. But I would say that the thread yoking everything, the kind of golden thread cinching it all together, is my passion for
Mm,
helping people like wake up to and come home to like the divinity within, their signature light
yeah.
by falling in love with the whole messy ride of being human. And so that's my thing.
Wonderful. Well, we are honored to have you here, and it's always an honor to have amazing guests. And then as the intro rolls forward, I learn more about who these amazing souls are that I've somehow connected with in that regard for the benefit of the audience. That is quite the accolades and laundry list of accomplishments in this wonderful world. So, a professor, an author, a poet, and a philosopher at heart, and a life coach as well, and a spiritual guru guide. I love that. Indeed. Well, we're going to unpack these things for you with the audience. So, audience, if you haven't liked and subscribed, follow down below. I'm getting better at being a host and learning how to say that, but we're going to dive into
Mhm.
this amazing woman. And let's just start there. What was the inception, the inciting moment in that regard, in the story of your life, in a rough sketch to final draft kind of presentation of things? Where was it that really got you into this? I'm going to now coach. I'm going to transition into this in my life. What happened there?
Oh, into coaching, into that particular iteration?
We'll start with that one.
Mm. Well, there's a few different ones. Which one should I pick? I will. I'll say two things.
Okay.
Two. So, so the first thing I'll say is that I never thought I would be a professor. I never thought I would be a teacher. The one thing that I knew I would never do is be a teacher
Mm.
because I was a hellion of a student and I was expelled from high school. I had my first detention in kindergarten. I was suspended 8 times in middle school. And so I remember sitting in the back of the bus one day coming home in like 10th grade, and I'd just gotten in my latest round of trouble, and I was looking out the window and I was thinking, well, that's one thing I know I'll never do. I'm never going to be a teacher.
Not that.
And but I did because I'm an activist at heart, and I really care about bringing more love into the world. I got to get my little dog here. Hold on.
It's okay.
Um,
We're being
and
visited.
This is Django.
Oops, there we go. This is Jenga. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, he's old and blind and gets a little whiny. Um, and so, so I was an activist in a lot of college, and I became pretty disenchanted actually with the world of activism for a lot of reasons. And um, not because I don't believe deeply in justice and love, but because I felt like ultimately there were better ways. So I actually found my way into the classroom thinking, like teaching and really inciting curiosity and igniting people's love of learning. Um, that's where it begins, because when we start to see ourselves as learners,
Mm.
and we shift from critical to curious, right, we naturally ignite the lover within. And
Mm.
so I became a teacher, and I was in academia for a long time, and pretty quickly, even though I was there for so long, the conventional classroom started to feel small and smaller and smaller. And so I did all these things all these innovative things to expand the classroom. And ultimately, my work just, as I kept reforming and revising the conventional classroom by holding all kinds of different sorts of things, I
Mm.
found my way into coaching, as a really natural segue. Like it was just the next. the next way to help ignite life force energy in the world. And it also happened to coincide with going through a divorce and hiring a life coach and all of that. So those are my two answers. They go hand in hand. Yeah.
There's always a genesis. There's always an evolution that
Right.
kind of naturally unfolds in this ever unfolding lotus of wisdom in life and how it kind of expands.
Mm,
I knew that there was, so thank you for sharing.
you're welcome.
In that kind of modality, what kind of coaching are you focusing on for the benefit of the audience as well as we
Yeah.
get to know this amazing, wonderful woman that you are? What is that
Mm-hmm.
you like to focus on? You touch a little bit about the idea of awakening that light within, so speak more
Mm-hmm.
about this.
Mm-hmm. These days I call myself a transformational life coach. And to be honest, Adam, I don't know how you feel about this, but I've never felt wholly comfortable with the word coach. I have a love-hate relationship with the word. There's a lot about it I love, but I feel like, but
Yeah,
there's a lot about it I don't. That's why I always say like 9 things that I am when I try to say what it is that I do. But to
agreed.
be, I do, I think transformational coach. I mean, I'm a triple certified life coach, whatever, but I I work primarily with women. I work with some men too, but I
Yeah.
work primarily with women,
Mm,
helping women to lean into what I call the path of pleasure. I talk a lot about pleasure, and I
okay.
really help women. Sorry, now Django is attached to my arm. I
Nice.
really help women um, tune into, identify what it is they truly desire.
Yeah.
Which may seem like such an easy thing, like, but it's not. It's
No,
really not. Right?
no.
What do you truly desire? And then there's the how can we trust? How can we trust and have faith in our authentic desire
Mm,
as actually legit?
mm,
And then how might I craft a life that is born of the light of my desire?
yeah.
Because that is how, whenever we anchor into and are serving from, creating from that nourished place of overflow rather than that place of producing as a response to anxiety.
Yeah.
Right? Like whenever we're creating and making from that place, in other words, whenever we're exercising our gifts and our passions, we are always in service of the whole,
True.
because that's the nature of the ecology. That's just ecology 101. Right?
Yes.
When the bee is ultimately the bee is serving the flower and everything else. Right? When the bee's trying to pretend to be the flower, it doesn't work out very well.
No, the macroscopic to the microscopic. Yeah. No,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
work
yeah,
with each other. So
yeah,
I love
yeah,
that though. In the
yeah.
truest sense, being able to find the depth of pleasure. And we're talking about that, and I'm sure about it, to peel back the layers of certain definitions to use a Socratic kind of method. The
Mm-hmm.
idea is of pleasure in the sense that it's fulfillment, and really in peeling back those layers of what the established society, what
Mm-hmm.
conventionalism has defined these terms, and then for these wonderful
Yeah,
people to be able to find what's authentic about them outside of what socially has been told to them,
exactly.
what
Right,
culturally
right,
has been put upon them, and even
right.
individual families, right, in that regard, because each one is different. So I'll allow you to
Absolutely. Right,
go for
exactly.
it. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So I end up working with a lot of women who are in who are at transitional moments, like women who are new mothers, or women who have just divorced, or women who are between careers.
yeah,
Um, uh, when these thresholds between the known and the unknown open,
right,
and there's a lot of anxiety,
yeah,
and yet inside of that anxiety is a great opportunity, and they know it, but they're scared, right? And
right.
so I really love that liminal space, which I think why I love teaching college for so long, because I mean, how cool to work with humans at the threshold of adulthood, right? It's like the most magical, crazy time.
Amen. Amen to that. Yeah, no kidding.
But yeah, yeah, yeah. But
Being
you're
that
right.
light in the dark. Yeah, being that light in the dark for them in that sense. I gotcha. And I see that in your content. And of course, I'm always happy with any guest that I ever have on. It's just a gush on you as well, in that sense that your content is amazing. Anyone that I've ever wanted to invite on the show is absolutely someone that speaks to me and resonates with me. And our community, it just embraces each one of these beautiful
Mm,
in that truest sense. So I find what you're doing to be great. The
well,
conversations that
thank
you have
you.
are authentic. You show up in a genuine way. And I find that all your messages are always from the heart in a very authentic,
Mm,
vulnerable way. So,
thank you.
in
Well, that's
that,
what I love about your work too. Just right
uh,
back at you. So
I'm humbly doing my best. I
yeah,
really am.
you're awesome. Yeah, yeah, I love it.
It's been a
Yeah.
journey. It's been a year, that's for sure. It's been what,
Mhm.
14 months, and started off with a rim light, and
That's
just
amazing that you've done this in a year.
it's been,
That's
it really
awesome.
has.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
To your guests, like that's a testament to like taking that leap and believing in it and going for it, and look what can happen.
that's right.
And
That's
look what can happen also, because you, one of the things I love about your messaging is that you really are in this for community.
right. Yeah, I really am. I really, really.
And not everybody is, and that makes a big difference. And you and we feel that, right? You can tell. I've listened to several of your podcast episodes, and you can tell there's a warmth and a vitality and a connection that comes easily, and that's fostering community is, boy, it's what we need, right? I mean, we're all so lonely.
That was my hope. I was looking online, if I may, and I'm sharing this now openly and vulnerably and transparently with you and the
Mhm.
world. I was looking online for something like this, in the truest sense of where you can go, where all the community and the comments and everything else like that would come together, and it would be a place where there would be a platform where coaches would come, and this one spot would be the hub where then if you came here you could find 25, 35 different coaches of all different modalities, from breath work with Olivia, to spiritual healing with Dea, to card reading with Jasmine, to straightforward life coaching with Cindy. Like all these different modalities would be this community, like you said. And it's been such a blessing. It really, really is. And we have some of the best
Yeah, you're
followers.
doing
Give yourself a comment down below, fam, in that regard, of the idea that this is
it.
always such a positive community. It just is.
Yeah, it's remarkable.
Wow.
Nice job.
Um, in that sense, with all of that in line with community, and you had mentioned that community is such a huge thing for you, and being an advocate in that activism side of things, what role do you think that community creation plays in the world of right now, with what you think is going on with where you're headed for your coaching world? We'll direct it that way. Where do you want to create a community for yourself in that sense? How can we be a part of that too?
Thank you for that. Thank you for asking that. Well, as usual, there are like 9 ways I could answer that question. I'm refining my podcast interviewing skills as I learn to give 2 answers instead of 10 at once. Um, um, I Community is vital to me. When I was a professor, when I was a teacher, I was always the person who had everybody put their chairs in the circle, no matter how many kids were in the room. No back to a face was my rule. And then the professor coming after me would leave a note on the board, put the chairs back in a row. And I would put a note on the board saying, I think you should leave them in a circle. And
Right.
so we would um, what are we really about here? Education or domination? And so communities that is like key to me. And so what do we really mean by community, right? Like, what
Yeah.
does that mean actually? And so what that means to me is like how it is that when we come together to learn from each other, to
Yeah.
share with each other, we we become bigger than the sum of our parts as a collective, but we also grow in ways we can't possibly grow when we work in our little silos, however connected virtually they may be. Like
Yeah.
when we really come together to make magic, because that's where we confront all of our crap. Like, do I fit in? Do I belong? All, the ways we keep ourselves safe,
Right.
they get pressed up against. And so being able to work through these edges together as we're co-creating, as we're loving each other, as we're challenging each other, we grow, we expand, we amplify. And so I see community as a way of coming home to our capacity as creators
Mm.
and moving beyond. Like, community always calls us into the unknown, calls us into expansion, just as it's bringing us home. So it's like safety and reaching out, right?
Yeah.
So I want to create community. I do it in all kinds of ways to get to the practical question. Like I hold retreats. I've held over 30 retreats. I do day-long retreats. I do week-long retreats. I've got a retreat, if anybody's interested, coming up in September in Maine, on the coast of Maine, which is going to be really awesome. Just
Very
went
good.
live with that one. But I do retreats. I do group programs. I do things like that. But I'm also really interested in creating doing more of an creating more of an organic community like you're doing here, where in addition to the content that I'm creating, putting out there through my newsletter and my socials, I'm in the midst right now, because I just left academia a year ago. So I'm in the midst of, I have a very solid one-on-one practice and group practice and retreat practice, but my next project, the thing that's exciting to me is, how do I, is it through a podcast? Is it through, some other kind of gathering form that we do once a month? I'm not sure. I'm working through that right now.
I like that. I like the idea also about the fact of redefining community and having such a broad understanding. Instead of having the limitations of these words, we can actually unpack them, especially as, let's say, spiritual guides instead of just coaches. I'm with you on that fact. To circle back to the question itself, like, how does that question with that term in that regard? We got rid of the idea about, the wise woman or the wise old man of the village. So now we use these terms coaches, right? We use these antiquated type of terminology. So I'm with you on opening up that in that regard. You are a light bearer, and I am doing my humble best to be a light bearer as well. So as we unpack this idea about community and creating it, I think community is creation. Even just the way that you are articulating it so well, it reveals the fact that as you bring these people together, you were talking about shaping the edges and so on and so forth. That's like sculpting. Like community is now creating the statue of David or whatever, statue of Aphrodite or whatever you want to create. Like, what a beautiful, And I think that you're right. I think you're on to the idea of you getting your own podcast. I think that's going to be a good one. I like.
Okay.
Oh yeah. I think you and your co-star there with the cute pup. I think that's
my little pup. Yeah, he can be. It's like the cute dog. Yeah.
That's
Okay, I'll take that as a sign.
it's
Time.
It's on the internet forever. There you go. I support her all the way, fam. There
Don't
we go.
edit this part out.
It's in all the way. All love. And so let's think about this in the fact of where the messaging will go. Where does the message and how the media message link inside of your heart and world for the benefit of the audience? Where do you think that the media makes a difference in the message sometimes? If you hear it from a podcast, if you see it in a post, or if you see it online, or if you see it in the news, what difference do you think that the connection to the way that social media, we'll kind of get into this idea about some bigger topics today right now. Where do you think that the message can be most impactful for us all in our actual healing journey? Because I think that's a big question. I want you to be able to tackle that however you do. So
that, I mean, I don't know if there's a one size fits all. So so for me and for those that I would consider, what I would imagine might be attracted to a community that I create or want to be part of, like this, that's a good question. I mean, I think it might sound just banal, but like socials and podcasts, these sort of like grassroots forums. I don't even listen to the news anymore. I mean, and that's not as a sort of blind act of privilege. That's like a conscious, I'm turning here. I'm not going to facilitate and feed this energy over here, this mirage, this delusion, this confusion, this matrix. I'm gonna, right? And this big, huge series of lies. Yeah, I mean, I think the more organic grassroots, the better. But there is something to be said for amplitude and numbers. Like if in fact we have a message that we want to get out there and we want to meet people and collect. So yeah, I mean, I think technology is phenomenal, right? It's part of what kind of makes us, it facilitates a loneliness in a way, but it's also transformational and magical. And so how do we show up to our technology, and so
the ability to have the opportunity to have, and I'm going to put this way, to interface as a block versus that this can also be used to bring us together. It was the main purpose, I believe, behind most creators, just like if we think about some sort of an ancient story or something else like that, where the scientist is working hard in his laboratory, wants to change the world, but someone who comes in, like a Rockefeller or something else in that effect, and is the financier, will end up using the technology, not for the betterment that the scientist originally had their heart passion in there, but will weaponize it in a different way. So I'm all on board about the spiritual purpose of what this attraction will be. To be able to connect people across the pond. We have a lot of followers, actually. Truthfully enough, shout out to everyone who's legitimately across the pond. We have a ton of people from France, from England, and from Australia. So blessings to you all.
Fantastic.
Yeah, blessings to you all. Hello, hello.
Yeah, it's
So,
amazing.
and it's interesting in that regard to be able to bring that together. And I'm
Hmm.
going to segue into the next question, and the fact of what this is something I've been wanting to ask for you in that regard and ask from you in the sense of even getting a chance to connect with you, which has been such a joy this entire time. What is something that really resonates with you? What are you passionate about as far as it goes for the healing process? What are the things that you look for in that regard? And again, these are broader questions, so you can answer it however you'd like. But I'm curious to know what really drives you for this coaching aspect. I know the community is big and the activism is there too. Go into it deeper. What else are some of the bigger qualities that
Yeah.
you love helping with? Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I am passionate about, and well, I'm passionate about a lot of things, but I'm deeply passionate about undoing the extraordinarily deep conditioning we have as humans that tells us we are flawed and
yes,
somehow wrong and not enough.
there it
You know,
is.
and I know that a lot of us do that work. But you know, that's what's in the way. We are all inherently iterations of God energy. I mean, I just did this whole presentation last week on fractal energy, right? And how it is, you look at the nervous system of the human body and you look at the lightning bolt and you look at the synaptic map in the brain and the neurons, and then you look at the bone marrow and you look at the riverbeds, and it's like all the fucking same, right? Where it's and so
Yeah,
right, and it's
yeah,
just amazing. And when we can really, really start to understand that we are iterations of God, source energy, just self perpetuating universe consciousness, iterating itself over and over and over again in order to know itself.
yeah,
Like starting there, like getting there, helping us peel back the conditioning that has taught us that we are so much more limited than we actually are.
mm,
That is what I'm passionate about. Because once we tap into and break out and like that God moment, like
yeah,
to see that in a client, to see that in a student, it's like boom, right? And I mean, you really can actually like see someone's light just go whoo. And
yeah,
that like, so I am passionate about that,
mm,
because when we all wake up in that way, man, we are birthing a new world. And I do
yeah,
believe we are in an incredible moment right now. I mean, like,
yeah,
that's why I believe we've connected. Like, we are here to collectively usher in the, we call it the new earth, like this new moment. But what that really means is like our capacity as, what Mary Magdalene or Yeshua, would call the anthropos, right? The full human, the
oh,
true human, which
yeah.
is so much different than what we've been taught we are.
Very, very true. I'm so on board with everything you say, and we're gonna keep on going. So, what are some of the main things that you have come up commonly? And this is just kind of flowing with it, with the
Yeah,
idea.
yeah.
What are some of the common things that the audience can even resonate with too? That they're going to be thinking, you know what, that's right. And these are the things that pop up in my mind. What have you found that people are held back by? What are some of those common ones?
Shame,
And yeah,
shame, 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 and let's go into that a little bit more, because that's really the root of it all, right? So
absolutely.
any variety of shame. I'm not enough. I'm
Yeah.
not good enough.
Mm,
I'm deeply broken. I'm flawed. Like maybe I look like I've got it all together on the outside, but at 4 a.m., there it is. I'm dogged by that weight on my chest. And maybe by the light of day, it kind of starts to fade. But boy, is it there that I'm just like, I have that, like, like
yeah.
we, as humans, like we, if we've been through trauma, which I know you have, I have, almost who hasn't, right? Like it's the initiation of the human experience. And so how do we learn to experience the inevitable pain of human being?
Yeah.
What John Keats, the poet, called wakeful anguish, right?
Mm, yeah.
How do we learn to experience our pain, the inevitable pain of human being, not as wrong, right? And certainly not as an indication that we are wrong or that the world is wrong, which isn't to say there's not a place for justice and corrective action. But we can't be seeking justice from a heart that's in a constant chronic mode of self-protection.
True.
So sourcing that energy from within is what I see as the antidote to shame.
Mm.
So learning to really love ourselves into growth,
Yeah.
not punish ourselves into change.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, that's where I say shame. What do you think? I mean, I think it all comes down to shame of one kind or another. What do you think blocks us?
I'm with you 100%. I resonate with the fact that it's shame and that it's genuinely, say space, it's ugly cousin fear
Yeah,
every single
yeah,
time. And
exactly.
there isn't ever a disconnect between those. Those two
Mm,
cousins walk side by side, hand in hand,
absolutely. Yeah,
right? And they're
yeah.
just one side of the other side. Where anger, its other side is grief, right? So like
Right.
there's always a symbiotic connection there. And is life with a tree or life inside of our hippocampus and our two hemispheres? It's always somehow connected. It really is. It really,
Hmm.
really is, right? And
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
so,
And I'm loving that you're bringing up fear too. And again, fear, right? Like just because we're afraid, and I don't mean to minimize and make small the
never.
experience of fear, which can be
Right,
absolutely paralyzing, right?
right.
But again, we are so conditioned to believe that a successful life is a happy life
Mm,
rather than a fully engaged life.
right.
And so we learn to avoid pain. We learn to, we're taught that to be successful or to be attractive or to be okay is to somehow live despite those dark patches
Right.
rather than through them. And so fear, how is it even possible to alchemize and walk through and carry fear healthfully
Yeah.
when we are being taught that half of our human existence is wrong?
Right.
From
Yeah.
practically every angle, right?
How are we
We
supposed to
learn,
the transformation, transfiguration process? How is I'm with you 100%. Keep
yeah,
going. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
There's no limitations there. No, none whatsoever. No.
and I love what you said too about grief and anger. And,
Yeah.
you know, I've been thinking a lot about grief lately, as I'm sure you have, and probably all of your listeners. How can we be alive and awake and alert and feeling in this world right now without feeling grief many
Never.
times a day?
Yeah.
Um, but thank God for grief.
Yeah.
Thank God for. I mean, I have learned, and this is quite recent, um, just through my some experiences in my own life, but
Yeah.
just to I feel when I'm deep in grief, I feel so lucky that I can feel it. You
Mm,
know,
yes.
because if we can be with it, what we just come back to is love, right? Because grief is
Right.
love, right?
Right.
And so I really see grief as like the most tenderizing of human emotions, and certainly not an emotion to move through or get over, or, you know, you done yet?
Right. And grief, if we may take a step back and look at it from the outside looking in, what I've come to understand about it, and we can work on this modality together, is the true fact of reframing it in the fact of understanding that it actually is misdirected appreciation and
Totally.
misunderstood appreciation. It is trying to literally let you know that I want to appreciate what it is that I had, even when it's in lack, in the sense that grandma is gone, so and
Yeah.
so and so, the job is gone, whatever it is, fam, that we're going through. It is literally your emotional world all conjuring up the idea that I want to appreciate what I had, and then you're learning how to appreciate it as it's no longer yours.
Yeah.
That's tough. We're holding space for you there. That
Yes, yes, yes.
grief, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that can lead
Yeah.
to a lot of frustration. That can lead to a lot of pain in that misunderstanding. Okay, now this is what Kirsten and I do as life coaches in that regard. When we go deep into these sessions, every
Mhm.
single one of these episodes where we have an amazing conversation with an incredible coach like you, we're going to touch on topics, fam, as we always do. That it's going to sound like, wow, that sounds super easy.
Right. But no.
Thing. This would be usually an inducted moment or a deducted part in a conversation that would have gotten 2 hours into your life. Okay, so this is just letting you know what the method is, and we
Yeah.
would bring this into you if we were having a session with you one on one. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. By primarily, right?
yeah,
Beginning by holding space. Like,
a
you
lot.
know,
Yeah,
don't we just radically underestimate the power of holding space?
yeah,
being there for one another without pushing the Kleenex box over to them, without without rushing in for a hug, but just like being with. I
Right.
think like it all comes back to like developing that capacity to
Right.
be with. And I hope that doesn't sound like I don't know. The more and more I do this work, both myself and with my students and clients, that seems to be the elemental and most important capacity that we can cultivate within and with each other is
I agree.
being with. Right?
I think you're saying it just right. And let's add to it with you. Sitting on the same exact bench with you, side by side here, adding with you. It's
Mm.
respectful. Because in that sense, going back to what you mentioned just a moment ago, it's respecting the divinity within the individual, that the
Yeah.
answers lie where? Already within you. So sometimes you just need to sit with someone and someone else can find the answers within themselves.
Absolutely. When their nervous system relaxes, because you're helping them co-regulate, right? Right? And it's right, right. When I'm not, when I, yeah, right, when we relax,
And
it's,
our
yeah.
lives, they get complicated in the sense that we don't necessarily always know how, because we weren't taught how, fam. If you would have known better, we all would have done better. There's never any judgment. There is nothing but understanding. Holding space
Mm-hmm.
in a safe space of understanding that we're all figuring this out together. Since Socrates and Aristotle and Buddha and Yeshua, and since the ancient Egyptian era, humans
Yeah.
have been working on the human task for this entire time. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
When we cultivate our lives and we find individuals who are going to play roles within our lives as friends, family members that necessarily aren't your family member, but you chose this person to be a father figure or a mother figure, or sometimes we find someone who's a bigger older sister to us that isn't really by blood, but we choose that.
Yeah.
These roles that we play, don't forget to throw in there a role for someone who's going to be there for you, someone who holds space for you,
Yeah.
someone who is there as a mirror for personal growth and personal development, and
Mm-hmm.
someone who is there as a person in your life who accepts you. Now, we weren't taught to look for those key pillars in our life. We thought we needed friends. We needed cool friends. We needed the popular friends, the rich friends, the friends you don't hang out with and don't mention anything about, but they're the friends you go have fun with on the weekends. So you're not being judged. We're revealing to you the fact that literally there are selections that we weren't taught that we were supposed to go make.
Mm-hmm.
Now that you know better. And when you do, then you can go make better choices.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And it just keeps coming back. I mean, each one of those so-called mistakes, right? Of like, I
Yeah.
mean, man, I've been through my menu of agonizing relationships, right? Romantic and otherwise, mostly romantic. But I don't regret a single one. I don't regret my marriage that ended in divorce. I don't, even though it was painful and it was hard on my kids, and we've all come through. I don't regret relationships or heartbreak because. And if to your audience right now, listeners, if you are in the midst of heartbreak, oh my love goes to you. I know it can be so paralyzing and so overwhelming. And so it's like a centrifugal force that just pulls the energy out of your fingertips, like into this black hole.
Mm.
I just want to say, hey, I love you. Like I love you and I see you. And you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
And the more you can be with yourself, like, even though it hurts,
Yeah.
and be careful not to make your pain mean that you are inherently flawed,
Mm.
right? Then each of these heartbreaks becomes an initiation into deeper self-love, right?
Right.
How much more present can I be to this pain? What can I learn about my role in this? Where might I learn to have a boundary in a way that's not reactive but responsive, that's loving, not cruel? How can I really stand up for and speak my truth, even though it feels like my feet are going to fall out from underneath me if I do? I mean, for a lot of women in particular,
Yeah.
speaking our truth inside of a romantic relationship can be almost paralyzing.
Yeah.
You know? So even though we've not been taught how to look for, and this is one of the things I love about your content, Adam, is you give I think you have a lot of really beautiful wisdom, and the way you deliver it is also, loving and nourishing. And as you direct people, not by shaming, but by claiming that, yeah, we make mistakes and we haven't been taught really how to look for healthful relationships, but here are some ways, right?
Right.
But even so, if you're someone out there who is in the midst of a relationship that feels like, well, maybe it's not, maybe it's complete, maybe it's coming to an end, or whatever, like,
Yeah.
I just don't believe there are any mistakes.
I don't either. I don't. We've been taught certain things that it's supposed to go a certain way. However, when we really do peel back the layers and look at it from a different distance and a different
Mhm.
with a new fresh set of eyes, we see that it wasn't at all what we were told that it could have been, because we were
Yeah.
socialized into these ideas that categorically experiences are supposed to fit these categorical imperatives, and all of a sudden, we're dealing with Kant and Rene, Rousseau, and although and people who, any philosophers out there yet who have yet to read all these ones are absolute great references. Though we're realizing that society is upon these pillars of other thoughts that literally created to the social contract, that growing up in the 21st century, we never knew who the actual authors of all of these constraints and, I'm going to say, colloquial phrases or particular social status quos. We didn't have a seat at that table.
Right.
That's where I advocate for people in that
Religious
regard.
doctrine, all kinds of stuff. Yep.
That's it. We just find it. We get told at grade school. We get told by the TV. We get told by the news, and all of a sudden we're being judged. And we go home and we do exactly what we're talking about today. We do the self-judging. We do the self-chatting in here, and we break ourselves.
Mhm.
And it's not where we're supposed to be, fam. And I validate you and I accept that that's where we are. In the coaching that we do, that's where we're at. Where the fact of meeting you is where you are. And like
Yeah.
she has said, where Kirsten has already brought forward, the biggest one, she's absolutely right. She hit it out of the park. It's chef's kiss. That it's shame in that
Yeah.
truest sense. It is. And if you just understand to accept yourself with where you've been, you'll see what Kirsten is saying. There are no mistakes. Because instead of trying to find out, let's pull this back and we'll wrap it up with a
Mhm.
pretty small, is there
Mhm.
isn't an idea of chasing the why. If you change what, this is one of the things that I usually do with NLP, is get you to write down your whys and then obviously reframe it and then approach it from the what, right? If
Mm.
it's why did this person break up with me? Why are you not good enough? Why did this love fall apart? That you can chase forever. If you now
Oh, yeah.
change that to what is this relationship teaching me? What is the loss of this job teaching me? If you look for the what, now you can actually start making an action plan of understanding that the lesson, not the mistake,
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love it. I love that, Adam. And one of the things that I often teach is, boy, and it's just another way of saying what you're saying is our questions really matter. And we ask ourselves questions all day long with the best of intentions because we really want to understand.
Yeah,
And a sidebar, I would say, even as someone with a PhD, understanding is very overrated,
right.
super overrated, and very often a distraction from the body.
Yeah,
Um, but like, why did he forget our anniversary?
right.
Why do I feel so bad? Like we can ask bad questions with the best of intentions. We can
Right.
get really great answers to terrible questions.
Mm.
Just
Mm.
keep
I like that.
reinforcing the problem, which is we don't think we're good enough on some. But I love how you put it. I haven't heard that framing before,
Mm.
that shifting from the why to the what isn't a sort of like, it's like a hack. I really like that.
Yeah. Just find that little bit in the, there's always a road that leads to the light. So just find that
Yeah, there is.
chasm, right?
Yeah,
that
there
you're in.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
well, let's this is so good. Let's continue forth in the fact of what are some of the things about the book that you've written and so on and so forth, and the poetry that you've gone. What are some of the inspirations? Let's go there. What are some of the
Mm,
inspirations that you've had in your life, Kirsten? What are those? Maybe the philosophers, maybe the poets, maybe who knows? Let's jump into that.
mm.
What are the inspirations in your world? I want to know. What are those?
Awesome question. Thank you. And then I want to know it from you. Um, Okay, some inspirations. Again, I'm thinking like, well, authors, thought thinkers, experiences, but I'll just go for the poets right now.
Okay.
So I would say my patron saint of life is Walt Whitman. So the American poet Walt Whitman, who would wear, he lived in the mid 1800s for the readers who don't know who he is, and he grew this big old beard, and he wore bare feet all the time because he wanted what he called mad contact with life.
Yeah.
And and his great song, I mean, his great poem, which is 596 pages long, that took like 45 years to write. So any of you out there struggling to finish your book, just you're okay. um, and he's self-published and is also the most famous American poet that there is. So, but Walt Whitman begins his 596-page poem, Song of Myself, with these lines: I sing myself, I celebrate myself. For what I assume, you shall assume. For every atom belonging to me, as good belongs to you. I lean and I loaf. I invite my soul to observe a spear of summer grass. I don't have those last lines exactly right,
Right.
but
Beautiful.
right, but the point, right? He starts
Yeah.
off. I don't know. When I first read Whitman, I was like 20 something, and I thought, oh well, what an arrogant whatever. But when I sat with it for a little while, moved on, I was like, oh my God, this man is a genius, because he was such a mystic. He was
Yeah.
a beautiful poet, mystic, nature without check, without original energy, as he puts it. He just loved life. And he knew that it's when we experience the like when we have that sensation of like feeling ourselves as like totally ourselves, like those moments, like when you were like super in flow, right? Like, I sing myself, I celebrate myself, not because you're arrogant and above or superior, but because you feel so connected and alive. It's like, right, it's
Yeah.
paradoxically in that moment where you feel so singularly you that
Yeah.
you are totally emptied of self, right? And he got that. And he wrote 590 pages exploring how that is and why and what. And he was deeply embodied. He writes about his armpits. He writes about his genitals. He has a whole like 3-page beautiful thing about making love to his soul at the edge of a riverbank. He
Yeah.
was pansexual. He was awesome. So he is a great influence to me. He's one of my, I can go on, but he's one of them.
Right. We'll make a separate podcast just for that. Just for
Right.
so. Okay. No, I
He's
love
so
that.
good.
Women's poetry is definitely the pure the response of good American poetry. I definitely will agree. And,
Yeah.
and you're talking about the fact of what you've gleaned from that. So, obviously, for the sake of the audience and for you to keep going on the same topic, but maybe not all of what he is, what are some
Yeah.
of the things that you think that anyone who would
The
go down
body.
that path? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
the body. I mean, right, this is something I talk about a lot, and this is I suppose this is why I feel legit sometimes calling myself a spiritual guide, as sort of hoity-toity as that might sound, because
Yeah.
I think one of my skills as a coach, really one of my strongest skills, is helping people come into the body and to
Mm.
really embrace the body. I do a lot of work with sexuality. I don't know if your listeners know about OMG Yes, but it's a platform that teaches about female pleasure for anybody who is interested in female pleasure,
Yeah.
females and anybody else.
Yeah.
But I am a model for them, which means I actually go on camera in front of a 9-person camera crew and masturbate in order to show people the beauty of self-pleasure,
Yeah.
of the shamelessness of sexuality. It's
Yeah.
not porn. It's not voyeuristic. It's
Right.
it's about technique. Um, Not that I think there's anything wrong with that either, but that's not what I do.
That's beautiful.
Um,
That's beautiful. Yeah.
and so like again, if we're going to try to like exhume
Yeah.
and heal shame,
Right.
we got to get into the body,
Yeah.
you know for 2000 years, with the burial and the demonization of the sacred feminine,
Mm.
which is a whole other podcast episode we could do, right?
Okay.
As we sever the knowing of the body and we pathologize intuition, we
Right.
pathologize any supernatural knowing,
Right.
we we relegate emotion as lesser than reason, the body under the mind, as if they're actually separate,
Mm.
um, we have cut off access to a whole half of our knowing. We see it in the way we treat the earth, the way we treat our bodies, our epidemics of obesity and disease.
Yeah.
So there is no ascension without coming deep into a relationship to the body, which means getting comfortable with mess and
Mm.
and smells and but also like that's
Reality.
the
Yeah.
beauty. Like that is the fucking beauty,
Yeah.
is this whole human experience. A beautiful spiritual life isn't something we achieve despite the body, right?
Correct.
The portal is the body.
Right. Yeah. Instead of seeing this as a mistake, which
Right.
has been
Mm-mm.
forced upon us, and I'm with you about the idea of how the disconnection between the conscious and the subconscious. This idea also, fam,
Totally.
the bigger part of the Holy Trinity. And I don't mean to do that out of disrespect. I mean that to how they've capitulated with the idea of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. That's the
Mm.
feminine. Why did they put that into the ghost category? That is the spiritual mother side of the
Yeah.
whole entire Trinity. And we just kind of, history went like that, and religious and religiosity went that way. And
Yeah.
cut it off from the lingam of the idea from the ancient Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita and the actual real spiritual connection with our
Yes.
understanding there with the prana
Exactly.
and everything else to that effect. And really the beauty of this, fam. Kirsten's on it. This is absolutely the beautiful part of the reconnecting. Our conscious minds are like your window of your computer. If you're watching this at home, if you're on your phone, it's just the small little window that you have with your apps. But there is a subconscious mind that is the entire CPU, that entirety of all of that. And the way in which our world has been grafted is to just focus on this small window, and we're going to advertise thoughts to you that we're going to implant as well. And what I'm with her 100%. I'm with Kirsten all the way of undoing what has been done and getting back to the way that our real ancestors in traditional spiritualism, alchemy, things used to actually teach on a wholesale basis. I'm with you all the
Yeah.
way. Continue on.
Yeah. 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 If I may, can I mention this trip to Egypt I took recently?
This. Yeah.
So when I left academia, I mean, I was super indebted to education, and I mean, I am a teacher at my core. I believe in that,
Yeah.
but I increasingly came to feel like the world of higher education and education as a whole is increasingly at odds with actual education, if you ask me.
Mm.
Um,
Agreed.
and part of the reason is because higher ed has become so corporatized, and
Mm.
it's increasingly estranged from the spiritual,
Yeah.
right? And the embodied. And
Yeah.
as a result, it's becoming it's a more and more fearful place.
Yeah.
And so I left about a year ago. I left early,
Yeah.
and that was a whole wild decision in and of itself. I gave up a pension. I gave up I gave up all health insurance. I gave up all this stuff that I'd been
Yeah.
thinking I needed, right?
You did it.
And I took a big leap.
Yeah.
And
Bless.
as I thank you, thank you. Yeah. And so and it was the best thing I did.
Yeah.
But I knew it was so interesting. As I made that leap, so anybody who's on the precipice and like, should I do it? Should I do it? Oh my God, do it. Like, do it, do it, do it. The universe does rise to hold you. Um,
Okay.
but what I discovered was, I mean, I had this hunger to retrieve what I learned to call the sacred feminine. I just had this hunger to come home and reconnect. So I put out some feelers, and I found myself a few months later on a pilgrimage into the sacred feminine in Egypt. And I'd been to Egypt actually when I was 20. That's a whole other story. But
Mm.
so I went back last year for a
Yeah.
2-week pilgrimage, and it was one of the most profound experiences of my life. The activations that I had in these temples, these downloads were extraordinary, this total remembering. And it's continued since. But
Mm.
one of the things that I learned when I was there, and maybe, I'm sure some of the people in your audience know this, maybe you do, but
Mm.
I did not. So we had an Egyptologist working with us, going into the temples, and he was Egyptian, he was Coptic, and he was a PhD in Egyptology.
Yeah.
And fascinating guy.
Mm.
And he's a mummification expert. So half of his time he spends in the field exhuming
Wow.
mummies with like a team from Cambridge, and the other half he gives tours. So
Wow.
we were like, going by these sites, like places he's
Yeah.
worked, And he said, it's very normal that we exhume mummies, because they exhume mummies all the time in Egypt.
Hmm.
Like you drive around and there's just like teams of guys working like just on the side of the road, like they're here like fixing our roads. They're there just like digging.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, it's really common to find mummies that live for like 5,000-year-old mummies who, yeah, they lived like 160, 180 years old,
Yes.
like regularly.
Yes. All of this. I
Right?
know.
Like this is not made up shit.
Right.
And I was blown away. And that was just the beginning where that was like that was like blew my mind. And
Yeah.
so in just the last like 8 months, the journey I've gone on into like the actual capacity,
Mm.
as I was saying earlier, the anthropos, the true
Mm.
human,
Yeah.
it is astonishing what we actually have the capability to do.
Sure.
Like it's and be.
Yeah. Wow. Yes. And she's absolutely correct. Fam, go check it out. You can YouTube it. There's documentaries. It's real. There is
Uh-huh.
absolutely endless human capacities and endless truths to all of this in the sense of how long we are able to live and how healthy we've been able to be. Even circling
Right.
back to using other names, but it also actually was someone with Yeshua. The idea about Christos, having that in the sacral and actually literally going up the 33 ladders, the 33 vertebrae of the spine, and then having
Yeah.
it come to the actual holies of holies, and it blesses upon the
Yes.
throne of heaven, which is the pineal gland, which awakens your Christ consciousness, fam. There are
Yes.
ways in which to connect to source. She's on it.
Absolutely.
This
Yes.
is, yeah,
Completely.
it's there.
Totally.
So,
100%. And that's it. Like
so
that's it. That's what this is all about.
all of it, all of it,
Right?
and yeah, I don't know why we're sometimes stuck in the homogeny of life where that seems to be tough to be able to grasp. But I do
Mm.
know as souls that we choose this path before we come down into incarnation. And some of us might have chosen a pretty challenging level, right? Like in video games, there's different levels and they get harder as they go on. Some of us, I think, are just awesome. I'm gonna swear, badass souls. All right, fam. I think we signed up for a triathlon and it's got 42 different types of obstacles. So if you're
Hmm.
struggling, it might be because your soul is just hardcore. Okay, so don't
Yeah,
worry.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I often tell my clients that, when you like stepping onto the path of your authenticity is going, right? It's going to bring you face to face with your internalized limitations and all the pain, right? So there's no way of avoiding it, right? We're going to get there. But
yeah,
what I've discovered, and Adam, I imagine you would agree, is that don't you find that the degree of resistance, like the degree of resistance, the degree of fear, the degree of resistance as we're on that path is
yeah.
directly proportional
Mm,
to the force of light that it's
yes,
holding back, like, right?
yes.
Which is such good news.
Beautifully said. Yes, perfectly said. Yes. Ah, agreed. And it wouldn't be otherwise in that truest sense.
Right?
You
It's
as an energy,
structural.
right, as a god being, godling, god, small g in that regard, as the Brahma and Atman relationship in that regard, the capacity in which you get a chance to push and pull in that sense, it would only ever be measured in the same balance as you have been able to get that octave level, right?
Right.
Yes. Yes. God.
And
I
I
love
think that's so reassuring to our like little human form, right? Like, oh, my my struggle isn't, again, going back to shame, right? It's not just an indication of my ineptitude, right?
it.
It's actually an indication of this like antipodal life force energy. It's like this, sometimes we need
Yeah.
resistance to push off of. Like that's we live in a dualistic world as humans. And so like resistance again doesn't mean it's wrong. Like
Right.
it's an energy, it's a force. And how can we learn to lean into our own resistance and not be scared of it? Right. And so I think recognizing that, oh, okay, even though I'm in the midst of it, my fear, my struggle, whew, this is actually telling me that the breakthrough after this breaking, like it is big, like
Yeah.
it is big. And to trust that,
Mm.
which which you will once you go through it a few times, right? You come to trust it, like, oh, I'm going to be okay, man. I'm going to rise. This is going to actually be great. I just got to ride it out.
Beautifully put. In the fact of leaning into your resistance. How do we do that? That needs to be podcast. That's a whole entire episode on its own. That's the
Yeah.
next one.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And leave a comment down below and say how much you want to see Kirsten and I talk about that again in the future. That would be
That would be fun.
there's the idea. There it is. There. Yep. So, let's do this also. As we always go through this entire show, and I think if you've seen an episode or two, thank you so much for being a part of that as well. I always back to my guest at the end of basically kind of as a parting gift, always with anyone who's on here. If this was going to be for the future, what would you want to leave on here for the message that you want to leave in this episode for all time? It's kind of a on your heart to be able to share today. That's what I always like to do. And again, we can chase a rabbit hole or we can wrap it up after you share. So hear what's on your heart.
Thank you. What's on my heart is what's in my heart, which is just love. Like, you really are love. And your human heart is so much more powerful than you know. Like the human heart, the organ of the human heart, 100 times stronger electrically than the brain, 5,000 times more magnetic than the human brain. Your heart, spend time there and trust what you know you know.
Well, there it is. So true. Well, fam, we have gone on a journey today. We have gone to Egypt. We have gone down below. We have gone through the spiritual nethers. We have talked about Whitman. We have talked about philosophy. We have talked about the social construct and peeling back the layers of fear and shame with this wonderful, amazing guest, Kirsten. Now, I'm going to also simply say thank you again. Where can they find you? Of course, we'll leave the link down below, but where can they find you, Kirsten?
Thank you so much, Adam. You can find me at KirstenHotelingZona.com. You can find me on socials at Kirsten Hoteling Zona Coaching on Instagram. That's my main social platform. I do have a retreat coming up. It's already a third full, but if you are interested in coming to Maine with a group of 15 women, and it's called Wild and Free, the retreat, and it's going to be intense and beautiful and sexy and gorgeous. Come to that. So yeah, I'd love to have you join my community. I'd love to have more conversation. Yeah. Thank you all. Thank you, Adam, so much. This is beautiful. Really beautiful.
Thank you so much. Fam, go find her. She's incredible. Link down below. Thank you again, Kirsten. Cheers,
Thank
fam.
you.
Have a great day.
You too.